they never really push themselves to the point where they can't talk during their workout in CrossFit. Right? That level of intensity, that wasn't mainstream until CrossFit.
I think your average bodybuilder, if you say like, hey, do you go through...
They're trying to do that too.
Yeah. Do you go through a full range of motion? Yeah. Stretch-mediated hypertrophy is, my understanding of the literature, is that is the best way to grow muscle. Functionally, the conversational piece, you go to the doctor and you say, hey, cartilage, blah, 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 it's eroding. Can cartilage heal? And they say no.
Right.
Cartilage can heal, but it heals so slowly, it may as well not heal at all.
I am joined today by Eric Williams. Eric is a level 3 ATG certified coach and the owner of Bulletproof Motion in Concord, California. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep, that's correct.
Awesome. Well, Eric, I've been looking forward to this conversation quite a bit. Some of the things that was going on behind the scenes that you may not be aware of, I reached out to Ben 5 or 6 months ago after having signed up for the ATG app about 2 years ago, I think. 2 years or 18 months ago. As I'm sure many people did, they discovered Ben Patrick's content from Joe Rogan. I am an ex-athlete. I played ice hockey as a child and then ran track and field and then worked as a personal trainer for 3 years. And as a trainer, I came to the conclusion that the impact I wanted to make in the health and wellness industry would be better served if I moved into capital markets. So I've been working as an investor in private equity for about 6 years now. But in that transition, I sat. And everything started hurting. And Ben Patrick's content was a breath of fresh air to help me regain pain-free knees. And currently I'm working through foot pain. But my time on the app made me crave an in-person experience. The best results I ever received growing up was when I was working with knowledgeable coach and competitive peers. And I wanted to have an in-person ATG experience. So I reached out to Ben and asked, hey, do you guys have a franchise model? I'd love to open up a franchise in Seattle. And the response I got from his mother was, no, the lawyers put a kibosh on that. There are too many issues around it, et cetera, et cetera. I was like, okay, well, let me join the coaching app and let me get to know the community. And then you drop the podcast with Ben. And it sounds like something's in the works. So I want to talk about that. I want to hear about how you're thinking about upholding the ATG brand and bringing an incarnate experience to the masses, not just online, but actually in person. Some of the mistakes that you've seen other platforms make that you've been a part of. So I want to get there. That's what I want to talk about mostly. But before we get there, I want to hear about how you grew up and how you came into the health and wellness industry to begin with.
Yeah, sure. So I was born and raised in Northern California and had a pretty ordinary upbringing of sports and athletics and activities. Wasn't particularly good at any of them. And, played some high school sports, but nothing crazy serious. Didn't even have a ghost of a chance of getting collegiate sports. So high school was pretty much where it ended for me. And then I just kind of forgot about athletics and activity for a while. I went to college and studied something totally unrelated to fitness. I went to the gym probably 6 times in 4 years. And, we had a world-class gym at San Diego State. And I just didn't really utilize it. I mean, I would go kind of pump the guns here and there, but didn't really do much. And then I found myself kind of mid-20s and just... I look back, I didn't feel this at the time, but I look back and I see pictures of myself. I'm like, oh, I got kind of like this like dad bod thing going on. And I was in a fraternity and I was pretty into alcohol and I was pretty into, I was like doing those kind of things. And fitness really wasn't a part of the lexicon or the future or anything at all. So fast forward to 2009, I'm a couple of years out of school. I finished grad school and I am talking to my brother, who actually is very much into fitness. He graduate degree in exercise science. He's doing all this stuff. He'd always been very health and wellness, oriented, all these kind of things. And he showed me this DVD called Every Second Counts, which was, this is 2009 for a lot of us, probably feels like it was just yesterday, but things were different in 2009. There wasn't really like a robust platform for videos. And so like deep people are still like circulating DVDs. So it felt very like underground. And Every Second Counts was a recap of I always forget, it was either the 2007 or 2008 CrossFit Games. I've got, CrossFit shirt on right now. And that he showed it to me and I was like, I don't understand what this is or why I'm we do this, but he showed it to me nonetheless. And some time went by. He introduced me to a CrossFit workout and I was woefully just beside myself with how difficult it was. And it wasn't actually that difficult. A little bit of running, some push-ups, some squats, and I was like, no thanks, this isn't for me. Fast forward a couple more years, and I'm living abroad in South Korea. He was coaching and working a CrossFit gym, and we just get to talking, and I'm actually working out consistently for the first time in my life. There's like a little local gym in where I was living in South Korea, and I go like, yeah, this CrossFit thing, yeah, let's do that. And I'm feeling this. And he was giving me some feedback and everything. And so we start talking. And eventually when I come back to stateside, we're like, hey, let's open a gym. He had been doing that. He had been coaching. He was going to be the content subject matter expert, and I had a graduate degree in something else. And so I was going to be like the technical administration ops. We come together, we make a business. It all sounds pretty reasonable. So I ran a CrossFit gym for about 11 years, and COVID happens. And then COVID, it was all of the awful things that everyone recalls and all that kind of stuff. And we survived, but kind of like battered and broken. So on the other side of COVID, where things started to flatten out again, our lease came up for renewal. It basically came to pass that we're like, look, we're not going to do this anymore. We want to kind of like do different things, go separate directions. And so what are we going to do? Or kind of more pertinently, we're like, what am I going to do? I've been doing this for the last several years. I quit my job. I had completely abandoned like my other path in life. And so I was all in on gyms and training. It's probably important to note there that probably 2 or 3 years into the gym process, I basically started coaching and was very much into coaching and adopted that as my kind of like new persona, if you will. So I'd abandoned what I was doing before, went all into gyms, was training, coaching, doing more classes, all this kind of stuff. And so developing my repertoire as a coach. So then when we closed down the gym, I was like, well, what am I going to do? This was in 2020, first month of 2023. So in 2020, I discovered Ben Patrick, Knees Over Toes, all this kind of stuff. Started working through that content area. And so by the time the gym had closed, I've been doing ATG stuff for about like 3 years. And so I was like, well, I'm just going to take that skill set. I'm going to go to a one-on-one basis. I'm going to try and work out in my garage. This is where I'm right now. I'm in my garage home studio. And so for the last 2 years, I've been working by myself as an independent trainer, my own business, my own practice in my garage as Bulletproof Motion. And that leads to today where I am helping ATG HQ, Ben Patrick and company with what might be the next phase of this, which is looking to be getting gyms out into the ecosystem. So at present, training, personal trainer, one-on-one, and helping on the behind the scenes build some gyms.
Wow. So what was your degree in coming out of San Diego State, and what career did you leave to go into the gym?
Sure. So I have an undergraduate degree in psychology, and then you can't really do anything with that. So I have a graduate degree in industrial organizational psychology, which is basically an MBA flavored psychology degree that uses like stats and principles and stuff like that for like training and organizational development. So it turns out my skill set as what it was often called in the field like OD, organizational development, or industrial organizational psychology is kind of a mouthful, but you can think of it as like it's management consulting, it's HR, it's organizational development, it's all those kind of like buzzwords and terms. So that is my background, and that's what I did for 8 years in the field, something like that, plus my graduate degree. So this makes me fairly well equipped to take all of those things and then marry them back with fitness. And, right now, like one of my main kind of like wrench on bolt tasks is helping develop coaches and get them up to speed with just basic things of organization, finance, structuring their own businesses, things like that.
Okay. So what was it about the 11 years of the gym business such that when it came up for renewal, you decided, no, XYZ isn't worth it? What were the headaches that you were dealing with that you're just like, no, that's it for now. That's it for me?
Sure. So my lease ended in January of 23. So in about January 22, let's say, I had a year to solve about 5 problems. The first and most obvious of which was membership had declined fairly significantly due to COVID, which all in all wasn't actually that big of a deal because we had gotten more robust in a bunch of different things, offering nutrition consulting and stuff like that. But so rebuild membership. My business partner, my brother, he was like, look, I've been doing this since I was like 15 years old. I want to go do other things. I was like, that's fine. I respect that. So at the end of this lease, I will be doing this on my own. So I have to either find a way to replace myself or find a way to replace him because I can't do both of our things. So that's 2. Over the last 2 or 3 years, and COVID was actually not pertinent to this. It just happened to occur during COVID. I lost 2 coaches. We had a team of 5 and we were down to 3. The culture of the gym had changed. So basically every 3 years, our gym went like a little evolution. And so emerging from COVID, the culture kind of needed like re-energizing. And then I'm sure there was a 5th thing. I'm sure there was 7 things. But like there was those major obstacles that I had to solve in order to warrant like, a 5-year lease at 80 grand a year. We're talking about like nearing $500,000 of commitments. I didn't solve any of those problems. And so it just became very obvious in about, I think it was like September of 2022, with 4 or 5 months on the lease, I was like, I can't do it. I got little kids at home. I got a wife and kids I barely see because I'm, trying to rescue this thing. It's time for me to try something different because I gave the gym an honest try. And, part of the stickiness of ego is you will bleed yourself to death trying to make a round peg fit into a square hole. And it was just being self-aware enough to realize like, I need to do something else. This isn't really going to work out.
So today you don't have a lease payment. I mean, you have a mortgage, unless your home is paid off. Yeah.
Right.
So that drastically improves your profit margins, or at least your debt service coverage. Describe your business today. What are the services you offer? And then I want to get into ATG and your vision for that. So what are your current services at Bulletproof Motion?
So it's essentially almost exclusively one-on-one training. I do odds and ends of other stuff, but I found that really what I like and what I excel at and what allows me to provide the best value and best results is in-person, one-on-one, occasionally one-on-two, but like for the most part, one-on-one training with routine, repeat folks that are there week in and week out. Like that's how people get what they want out of this, this process.
Do you find that the ATG protocol is being used as a supplement to other activities for your clients, or is it their primary physical outlet?
That's an interesting question. I would say it's like 50-50. So half of my folks are maybe succumbing to the modern lifestyle of everything is so busy that I don't have time to do anything but like kind of work and eat and take care of my kids, and which are all perfectly noble things, but like busy. But for like this high ticket price tag I'm spending on the training, I probably wouldn't do anything. So it's like, I'm there my twice a week and this is what I do. And like, I'm kind of hanging on by a thread, but in general, if they're consistent, like that works out. And the other half is using it as a supplement to, hey, I play a recreational sport, or I want to be very active, but my knees or my low back or whatever it is. So they're making time for physical activity, they're making time for things, but they need this to basically have as a base to put the other stuff on top so that they don't completely break down. And I'd say that captures pretty much everyone I work with.
Yeah. So let me tell you what I love about ATG. It is unlike any other training protocol that I've ever observed, ever. It is simultaneously physical therapy and sports performance paired into one.
Yep.
So I did study this for my undergrad, and I worked in the industry for 3 years before leaving it. CrossFit was pretty monumental when it came onto the scene, primarily because before CrossFit, average people did not do compound movements, just period.
I would agree, yeah.
Right, like CrossFit made it mainstream to squat, overhead press, and be exposed to Olympic lifts. Those are things that only if you were an athlete in college and high school did you ever touch those. And the average person never squatted, definitely not below parallel, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like that just never happened. And so for that, I think the benefits that CrossFit put into the fitness ecosystem and intensity, right? So actually pushing yourself, like when most people leave high school or college, they never really push themselves to the point where they can't talk during their workout. And CrossFit, right?
Yeah.
Like that level of intensity, that's just, that wasn't mainstream until CrossFit. So those things were amazing. One of the downsides that I observed in CrossFit was consistency in the product delivered, depending on where you went. Quality control, right? Some gyms had phenomenal coaches that were very consistent. And other gyms, it was kind of fend for yourself. Here's the workout on the board, 3, 2, 1, go. And people get injured, right? So when it comes to ATG, one of the things that stood out when you were chatting with Ben was this obsession with maintaining quality.
Yep.
How do you envision that being maintained as ATG grows slowly and then eventually quickly over time?
Yeah, it ends up being like, what are your KPIs, right? So if you think about like, what is the North Star of CrossFit? It is essentially capacity. It's output. So how many rounds in 5 minutes? or how quickly can you get those 5 rounds done, or whatever the configuration is. And that produces really interesting and special things, in my opinion, in terms of like a work capacity thing, but at the expense of other things. And most notably, CrossFit gets kind of pooped on for form, because that is not the KPI that they're chasing. They're quite literally saying, if I do things slightly sloppier, or sometimes much sloppier, I can actually do them quicker. So, well, which is the thing? Yeah, I mean, it's really everything. I mean, if you look at it, like pull-ups, comes to mind, and, we could get into the weeds on, whatever it is. But like, if you look at your average person, they are basically going 7:59 is better than 8 minutes. And the route to get there is irrelevant. And then the coach comes in and adds maybe caveats or asterisks to, slow it down to learn the movements or whatever it is. But ultimately, that's the KPI. And so for bodybuilding, the KPI is size. There aren't bodybuilders trying to be smaller or trying to do bicep curls faster. Like, there's one thing that's
hypertrophy. That is the metric.
Yes. So it's like, okay, so what is the metric? And, it doesn't take much imagination to go through every physical discipline and assign like a word or short sentence to what those KPIs are, right?
Yeah. Track, speed. That is the metric.
Exactly. There's no like Usain Bolt. I'm not a track guy, but Usain Bolt is not often credited with having good running mechanics. But who cares?
Who cares?
Because speed.
Yes.
So
yes.
It's irrelevant. So what is the KPI for? Actually, I'm just kind of curious to like get your hot take on this. What is your estimation of the KPI for ATG?
The first thing that comes to mind, I'm not sure this is the KPI, is pain-free movement. But that's not it. At least that's not encompassing enough, because elements that I've observed in ATG are strength and zero pain through the widest joint range of motion possible. So take your joint, elbow, hip, ankle, knee, spinal column. The further you can move it under load without pain, the better. That's what I've observed. I'm not sure how you quantify that in a word. And maybe you have a different take, but that's what I've observed.
Yeah, and part of the reason why I don't just answer in the one word like bodybuilding size or whatever it is because this is still a point of discussion amongst coaches, amongst the broader ATG thing. So there's the balancing the body through exercise. There's strength and length. There's pain-free movement. And so I think it's early enough that we actually don't have like a real strong one-sentence consensus as to what this is. If you were to look back at like an early Ben Patrick video, it might be something like regression, pain-free range of motion or something like that. And then people are like, well, that's too rehabby. He's like, well, no, this actually applies to athletes too. And they're like, well, that's not how you train athletes. And so there's not really, I don't think anyone on planet Earth would disagree with presumption that bodybuilding is about muscular size and hypertrophy. That is a singular focus. I don't know that we quite have that agreement. But I think all those things that you suggest are like perfectly reasonable. So pain-free is definitely one of the tenets. But there's even like asterisks there where it's like there is some level of discomfort and pain. And how do you define pain? Like this, These are not like easily, these are like fuzzy words when you get down and like really try and do it. So generally pain-free and generally, I would say, mitigating in a pain stimulus as you go. So if we say, oh, how does that feel? 3 out of 10. Okay, how's the next set feel? 2 out of 10. Okay, that's good. Is that pain-free? No, but that is migrating towards this principle of pain-free versus if it goes to a 3 to a 4 to a 5, we have violated that principle. That's not a very short way to say any of this stuff.
Yeah, it's not. And at the same time, you cannot discount the aspects of maximal mobility and strength, right? So ATG is not trying to be yoga,
right?
Which is kind of like maximal flexibility.
Right.
It's also not trying to be pure strength,
right?
But it is trying to be both, right? We want you to have pain-free movement through maximal range of motion under load.
Generally, yeah. I mean, here's the interesting thing, is if you just put that definition out there and you said, hey, powerlifters, are you trying to do this? They'd be like, yeah, of course I'm trying to do that. So I don't know that like I think your average bodybuilder, if you said like, hey, do you go through...
They're trying to do that too.
Yeah. Do you go through a full range of motion? Yeah, that is stretch-mediated hypertrophy is my understanding of the literature is that is the best way to grow muscle. So are you going through a full range of motion? Yeah. Is it pain-free? Well, I try to make it as pain-free as possible, but sometimes there's a little bit. And it's like, are we playing on the same playing field? I don't know. And quite frankly, I don't know if I'm here to answer that question because I didn't invent AGG. My name's not Ben Patrick, and so on. But like, this is the sandbox that we're playing in, and these are the principles that we're getting at. And I think time just has to unfold. Like, I'm not eager to be like, this is it. I think it's just going to naturally evolve in time, and we'll look back retrospectively and go, okay, I get it now. But it's early. I mean, he's only been on the scene for like really 2-3 years.
See, this was blowing my mind, because even now, hearing your story and hearing like, oh, I started really going down, I discovered Ben Patrick's content in 2020. I'm like, 2020? Like, that wasn't that long. And I started going serious in 2023. I'm like, wait, 23? Wait, that was like 2 years ago. This is so early. Okay, so the value of any service, doesn't matter whether you're fixing your car, getting your lawn cut, or whatever, begins with pain. And it seems as though, unlike any other health and wellness protocol, with the exception of maybe physical therapy, ATG is really coming literally at pain, not psychological pain, but like physical pain, more than any other like fitness protocol or in-person product. Like CrossFit, pain is not the priority. Orange Theory, pain is not the priority. Your Global Gym, pain is not the priority. But for ATG, that is a priority. And so there's value there. How do you envision maintaining a premium price point for ATG over time? Or just creating value in the brand such that the type of person who seeks out an ATG facility is expecting to pay a premium and have a premium experience?
Yeah, so this is maybe the question, and why I think I'll go on a limb and say that all fitness is getting it wrong to the degree of how can this be like maximum longevity type of thing. Okay. So again, back to the KPI thing. So let's say, I've looked into this, I've looked into franchise disclosures and all this kind of stuff, and I won't name any names in terms of like throwing gyms under the bus, but let's just say I want to open a gym franchise. You go in and you look at all the things, and all of this is oriented towards basically, okay, can I be profitable? And like, what are the revenues and all this kind of stuff? And at the end of the day, these things look largely indistinguishable from opening a Chick-fil-A. And so the reason why I find that to be significant is that we're looking at this, we're like, what's a good business? Should I open self-storage, fast food, or a gym? And so immediately I've lost the plot in terms of like, what is the delivery of service? Because I'm looking at this like as a return on investment, revenue type of thing. So you go, okay, so that's kind of one way to look at the problem. Another way is, all right, I am defining my output in terms of maximum results, let's say. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, that sounds great, but maximum results often, arguably that's what CrossFit tried to do, is like, well, we measure everything and it's repeatable and measurable, but it's also like constantly varied and all this kind of stuff. And so if I do all my work and then I come back and I retest Fran and I get 5 seconds off, I check the box, I got fitter. But that's pretty good for the athlete. I mean, arguably, aside from like for your average person doing average things, that's like not a bad way to do it, is just go like, all right, I did all this stuff in a year. I go check my benchmarks and how did I do? But the linchpin there is that the coach is not really a part of that, right? So your average CrossFit membership across the United States, we'll just use the United States for now, I think it's like $175 a month. And your average gym is running probably somewhere in the neighborhood of like 15 to 25 classes. And you do the math and you do, the average attendance for a class is like 7 people, I think the recent metrics are. And so you multiply all that stuff out and you go, okay, we can afford to pay the coach maximally $35 a class. And then you do all that math and you go like, okay, well, if one coach coached every single class for the entire year, they'd make $19,000. It's like, okay, well, this is why the fitness industry has exactly this cycle. I'm interested in fitness. I get into training. I realize I can't make a living, so I get into something else, which is usually police, fire, nursing, teacher, alternative. I've seen this happen so many times.
Capital markets. That was me. That was me.
You just do something else.
Yeah.
So it is incredibly difficult to be sustainable. And the reason why I'm painting this like long, convoluted thing is when I get to the punchline is going to sound like maybe a little off target, but given all these other things, I think it's actually really important. So the number one KPI that I think needs to be chased for a gym model, ATG, CrossFit or otherwise, is the coaches need to be really well paid. And the reason why the coaches need to be really well paid is because every single parallel in every single white collar job you can imagine, all of my friends that got into finance are really well paid. All my friends that are lawyers are really well paid, and on and on and on and on and on. Anyone who went to college and anyone that cares about whatever it is that they do, they have the expectation of, in their area, being able to make enough money to buy a house and support a family and take vacations and save for retirement. Fitness coaches cannot do this unless maybe you get into supplements or maybe you're super jacked and attractive in Instagram. We're talking about like 1%, right? Where far more than 1% of lawyers are making it, right? The vast majority are probably doing just fine with the exception of people that just don't want to do it anymore, right? So the coaches have to be really well paid. I find that as a non-negotiable. So it's like, okay, well, can we infer that all other things are taken care of if that occurs? Okay, if the coaches are really well paid, that implies that they're charging a decent amount of money. Well, if they're charging a decent amount of money, they also have to rise to the occasion. You can't just say, like my lawyer bills at $495. He probably actually bills more than that since I last talked to him. Let's say he bills at $550. I can't charge $550 for a session, but I can charge $200. But the average rate for a personal trainer in the industry right now is like $77. So what's going to separate me at $200 from $77? Well, I have to be able to do something really interesting and special. I have to be able to deliver like 3 times as much value, essentially, than the guy who's charging $77. Okay, let's table that because that's a whole different discussion. So if I can charge, stratified to my area, so let's just call that between 100 and 200. So I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, 200. You live in, rural Texas, maybe it's 100, right? So you have this bandwidth. Okay. I have to charge a high amount, which means I have to deliver results, which almost by definition, if I am delivering results consistently, supposing I'm not a jerk, I will also field high quality referrals, high quality reviews, and have a higher quality gym. Then if we're talking about, whatever the ATG franchise gym affiliate model, whatever that ends up being, whatever the take towards HQ ends up being is also going to be good because 5% of 200 is much better than 5% of 77. I'm going to much easier be able to pay my rent. So my rent back at my old gym was $8,000 a month. It's a much easier check for me to write, $8,000 a month, if my gym is doing $1 million a year versus if my gym is doing $160,000 a year. Okay, so the business works. The quality of the session, it is implied that it works because you will only shell over $200 so many times before you realize this guy's actually a scam artist. This is bullshit. It's kind of like cart horse a little bit. So we got to figure out which one of those comes first. Ideally, results, prices, and so on for the individual. But all of these things work together in an ecosystem that allows quality control to blossom versus, let's say, and this is hypothetical. I'm largely drawing from, I've been to like 50 CrossFit gyms in like 20 states and 8 countries broadly. I have a coach who's been there since 5 a.m. They're on their 4th class in a row. They're counting up their paychecks and they're getting, $20 a class and they're just kind of checked out. Passion will only take you so far. It'll probably take you a couple of years into it, but I'm 41. And at some point you're going to go like, dude, fuck this. I'm done. So all of those things put together, I think, are what needs to happen. And then, by the way, this is not specific to ATG. This is, I think, for any powerlifting, gymnastics, jiu-jitsu, whatever, it doesn't matter. If the coach is well paid, you give yourself the best probability of all of the other factors and characteristics being met. If the coach is not well paid, you can get away with it for a short period of time, but eventually something will break.
Mm-hmm. It's a downward spiral.
Yes.
I'm excited to see how you figure this out because my gut is that ATG has the potential to be the most valuable in-person concept on the planet. And I believe that because I think everyone struggles with pain, like physical pain. Ben Patrick focusing on knees was such a revolution because so many people are like, yeah, my knees hurt too. And no one in the fitness industry was really addressing that, right? And when you throw on it shoulders and feet and back, right? And probably back is probably number 2. Knees, back, shoulders are like the most chronic. And then people also talk about neck and feet, right? Plantar fasciitis, that kind of thing. Having a concept that prioritizes eliminating pain is worth a lot of money if people have social proof and the brand is able to consistently deliver that result such that people know, hey, if I spend $500 a month here, I know I'll be pain-free within 9 months. Like, that is worth something. And that is a claim that, as far as I can tell, no one else is really making, except maybe physical therapists to some degree. What are your thoughts there?
Man, that is, okay, so one, I think there's an important thing here is like, well, why Ben? Why ATG? There's a million coaches out there talking length and strength and, all this kind of stuff. Why Ben? And I think at its core, his story is extra compelling because of the delta of where he started versus where he ended up. So there's that. The thing that people don't really realize is how long it took. And so if I were to be hell-bent on just growing my arms as big as possible, I could basically assume, like, let's say I'm a novice. In 6 weeks of training, I could increase my arm size. And in another 6 weeks of training, I could increase it again. Now, obviously, I get diminishing returns, but then, let's say I'm a 10-year veteran and now I'm looking for like 1/4 inch every year, or whatever it is. But you have this kind of like, I'm just kind of pulling numbers out of the ether, but you have this somewhat linear thing where you go like, hypertrophy is going to give you some level of consistent, and strength too. If I was just hell bent on like maxing out my bench press, right? And you get the proof positive of that in like no time at all compared to the re-education I have to undertake when somebody's like, hey, I'm in pain and how long is this going to take and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, okay, look, in a very broad sense, your muscle will adapt on about a 6-week turnover. Your connective tissue will adapt on about a 90-day turnover. Okay. So do you find it the least bit shocking that people tend to feel good in about 3 months, something bugs them and they take a little time off and then they feel good and then they work out for 3 more months and then something starts to bug them and then they take some time off? They live in that cycle over and over and over and over again because muscle essentially grows slightly faster and adapts slightly quicker and slightly better than your connective tissue, which is why when people do gear and they get like crazy big muscles and they start blasting, just rupturing tendons and stuff all over the place. So you have this protracted time to wait. As far as I know, Ben, publicly anyway, is the only one who's like, I am going to, if this takes me 100 years, I'm going to stick to the process. So he is now, by my estimation, 13 years on his journey. I'm 4 years on my journey, and some of the people I'm working with are 2 years on their journey. But people are still kind of impatient. They're kind of itchy. I'm like, look, I am now of the mindset, all of my goals are punted to like 5 years out. I don't have any goal that can be accomplished in less than 5 years. Where most people are like, hey, the wedding in whatever, and I want to lose 10 pounds by Cinco de Mayo and whatever. So all of your goals have to be protracted like crazy. And that's for like the easy stuff. So if you have like meniscus issues, functionally, the conversational piece, you go to the doctor and you say, hey, cartilage, blah, 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 it's eroding. Can cartilage heal? And they say no.
Right.
Cartilage can heal, but it heals so slowly, it may as well not heal at all. So cartilage, the timeline so muscle is like a couple of weeks. Connective tissue is a couple of months. Bone is like a couple of months longer than that. So if you have osteoporosis, you can remineralize, but it takes work and it takes a long time. Cartilage is like 1 to 2 years. So in the process of healing your knees, if you got junky knees with bad meniscus, you have to essentially stop doing everything you're doing to remove the mechanical stimulus that's basically jamming up your knee that's causing erosion in your cartilage, and do all the rebalancing stuff that is going into making sure that those mechanical pressures don't come back. And you have to be patient enough to allow your body to just undergo the natural healing cascade to actually let that stuff happen. I actually lost sight of what the actual question was because some of this stuff requires you to like get all the way down to the beginning and go like, well, why is this happening at all? So why Ben? I would say that's the reason why. And could you actually reframe the question? Because I was planning on circling this back around if you happen to recall what the question was.
The question was, have you seen any other training concepts that have elevated pain elimination to the forefront of the value proposition?
Okay, thank you. Tie this all back together. So we're talking back to KPIs now. If we're talking about sports performance, the KPI almost certainly is 1 season at a time. Or if you're in high school, it's to get to college, 2 to 3. Or if you're in college, you get to the pros, 3 to 4. And if you're in the pros, it's kind of season by season, like contracts.
Stay in there, keep renewing that contract until you can't do it.
So it is almost at no point long enough to basically go back and say, I'm on this trajectory where I'm going to get jacked up. How do I, and by the way, dude, I work with so many former college athletes. College sports is like a total meat grinder. So they're way off in the weeds in terms of like actually trying to protect athletes or whatever it is. So not even close. The modern paradigm of physical therapy, as I understand it, is such that it's all science-based, which is a good thing. We want things to be science-based. But what that means is you get a very limited bandwidth of things to actually utilize in like a formal insurance-based medicalized system. So I don't take insurance. I don't answer to Kaiser or John Muir or whatever the local health thing is. I can do whatever I want. So I am free to explore infinite numbers of permutations and combinations to basically get you where you need to go and protract that timeline as long as it takes. So I'm not beholden to 6 weeks or 10 sessions or whatever it is, which is why my clients tend to do much better than your average person going through PT. The PT paradigm is also like, if you think of, you ever been to Disneyland? Mm-hmm. You ever looked around and seen how people are doing? I consider Disneyland to be the greats. Like if you want to get a snapshot of how people are doing, go to Disneyland because they're all there. Every strata, every country, every shape, you have rich people and poor people, they're all at Disneyland. And people are not doing very well. So much so that in the last, 20 or 30 years or something like that, the average weight for Americans, they've conflate these ideas of like average and normal. Average just keeps creeping up and you go like, oh, you're average. It's great. It's like, well, compared to what? Last time I went to the doctor, blood pressure was now 132/85. I thought it was 120/80. So all of these things creep up. And so we're servicing basically regression to the mean, and the mean is getting worse. And so everything is oriented towards like, okay, so you have some occupational thing or your wrist hurts or whatever it is. How can we get you back to standing for a couple hours and getting out of your car without your knees hurting and reading the newspaper and going to the grocery store? And if you can do those things, mission accomplished. So it's like, again, it's all about KPIs. And so when Ben comes out and says, I was a busted athlete and I couldn't do anything and, all the stuff. And he said, now I can do all these things. All the people who were like, oh, I was here and I thought I couldn't do anything. Everyone said I can't. The doctor said I can't. The athlete said I can't. No one said I can. It's all impossible. And here's a guy saying I can. Well, no wonder. And by the way, he can deliver on that promise. Well, no wonder that there's all of this hype around him. No wonder he's got his 2,700 knee success stories. No wonder he's got all these thousands of people on the platform and millions of followers on Instagram. And I think the unique characteristic there is he, for whatever reason, was uniquely able to go, I'm going to fix my knees no matter what. No matter what. And he did. And now we all are a benefit of following in how he did that. And by the way, you can apply those principles to every joint.
Yes. That's the real magic of ATG, is the knees are just the gateway drug because everybody can relate 100%. To that. Everybody can relate. But it's every single joint, right?
Yes. So to answer your question in very close summary, we were looking at the wrong problems. We were chasing the wrong indices. And the regression to the mean on what we come to expect from ourselves has gotten so low that there's like no reason or no hope or no resources to even think that a 41-year-old guy can do. I did jujitsu this morning, pain-free, totally fine. Not even thinking about the litany of injuries I've had over time. That should be impossible. And it's not.
And it's not. It's not at all. And it needs to be in person everywhere. It's too valuable to humanity not to be. So what are your current thoughts on how to make sure coaches are paid at the level of, let's say, this changes based on the city, but let's just say your average town tax accountant or your average town, let's say, estate planning attorney, right? How do we get trainers on par with that middle class income?
Yeah, so the question for trainers has always been like, all right, you want to start training? What do you want? They're like, I want to get in shape. I have heard this sort of like, I just want to get in shape. It's like, good luck chasing that as an outcome. And so people are like just uncomfortable enough. On a scale of 10, they're like, how's your health and fitness? They're like, I'm a 6 and I would like to be a 7 or an 8. That distance is just so fuzzy and just not palpable, and it just doesn't really work. And so when people come to me and they're like, CrossFit was actually a fairly good solve for that because it gave people something to sink their teeth into. They're like, oh, I actually really like this, so I want to go and do it. But you're not going to get adherence. You're not going to get consistency. People are going to get burnt out with that sort of just vague whatever it is. So I approach this and I train people from a problem-solving perspective. So what is the problem that I can help you solve? And for the most part, that is joint pain, athleticism, all this kind of stuff. And so it's much easier for someone to sink their teeth into. No different than, you're in finance. If somebody's like, hey, what are your financial goals? You're like, I just want some more money. And they're like, okay, what do you mean? Do you actually need a bigger paycheck? Are your expenses, do you even know what you want? But if somebody's like, look, I inherited terrible financial strategies from my parents. I'm underwater on credit cards. I am addicted to buying a new car, leasing cars every, time the new one comes out. And I found myself at 35 with no savings and I'm 50 grand in debt. And, there's a financial audit show thing, Caleb Hammer. I don't know if you've ever seen this. I watch, and he talks to these people that are just totally upside down. And I would say probabilistically, if you find somebody who's in the dumps and they're at a 2 or a 3 and they're like, please help me, and you can craft a solution that makes sense to them and resonates with them, and you can walk them through it, and you can, milestone, step by step, you can get them to that 7. You can get someone from a 2 to a 7 way faster than you can get someone from a 5 to a 7. Because a 7, it's just it's right there, and maybe it'll just happen by accident, and I'll get to it. It's within arm's reach. They don't really need it that bad.
Yeah, they're not rock bottom.
Yeah, that has been what fitness is for most people most of the time for the last 40 years since fitness became a thing, and only bodybuilders who love the pumping iron really succeeded. Everyone else just kind of I jog, I do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But fixing people's pain and like truly getting them out of that and then giving them their life back and giving them some youth back. And a lot of these things, you say, and it's just like, it's to paint a picture. So if somebody says, hey, I'm 50 and I'm feeling run down, I'd be like, I bet I can get you back to feeling 40 again. And they're like, dude, fucking sign me up.
Right.
Well, that sounds great. Yeah. And a 30-year-old is like, I don't want to feel 40. I'm like, great, well, you'll feel 20. So it's like this idea of relative to you getting some vitality back is a very powerful way to speak about it. And then delivering on those things. So not just like getting people sweaty and making them ride a bike and making them do burpees and like drill sergeant stuff. That will work in the short term, but like really delivering on this idea of leveling up their joint ability, their strength, their stability, their ability to produce and tolerate force has these real life outcomes of like, the example I get all the time is, I was playing with my kids and normally after like 20 minutes of kicking the soccer ball around, my low back hurts. And this time it felt great. And I just played for like an hour and it was so great. And it's like, yes, it's those qualitative, like, did they get in better shape? Maybe. Can they do more burpees, CrossFit style faster? Not really. Did they lose weights? Not really. But this qualitative element of them just unrestricted, enjoying a carefree life without this burden of pain on their low back is what drives them to, a year. Sign me up. I'll do whatever I need to do to keep this for as long as humanly possible. And like that kind of conversational piece is what I'm trying to wake folks up to instead of like, don't find clients who just go like, I don't know what I need. Just help me a little bit.
Yeah, it's like okay,
that
look,
person's not ready.
Planet Fitness exists for that.
Yeah, that's fine. And that's totally fine.
And it's good, right? And that's actually what you should be doing, right? You got your treadmills, you got your things, you can do whatever. But yes, if you really want to, I love how you said, get your vitality back, rewind the clock 10 years. Like you need to be doing, if not this, something like it. And you got to be doing it consistently. And you need to be led. You need to be coached because the movements in the ATG program are challenging for a reason. And yes, you can do them on your own, right? I think having a self-serve model is brilliant and it served ATG well. But man, like even me as a former trainer and former athlete who can understand ATG, I just want to train with other people, man. Like I want other people next to me and I want a coach leading me, right? Because I always gotten better results under that format, always. Right. So if you could snap your finger and change one problem about your business tomorrow, what would it be?
At this juncture, I quite earnestly don't have any problems with my business. I mean, the business, it would be the ability to say no and create better boundaries because I say yes to everything and all of a sudden my schedule is crazy. I get opportunities and I make more money that way, which is the reason why it keeps happening, but it erodes my quality of life. So it's like, I don't know, that's a great problem to have.
Mm-hmm. Do you currently have any employees? No. Okay. In this premium ATG concept, do you envision facilities being coach owned and operated or some other model where it's an experienced coach CEO who oversees a business and is focused more on growing an organization and lead generation and sales, and then having coaches that are under them in the facility who are earning that middle class, upper middle class wage? What do you envision that?
So I'm going to answer it like kind of indirectly. So I have, I think, functionally maxed out what I can do here by myself in my garage. So at some point, even if I was like uber amazing, the market really isn't going to bear like a $500 an hour coaching session because you either have to find celebrities or billionaires or like there just isn't enough regular people to actually service that level, right? So functionally, I'm kind of tapped out in what I can probably do in terms of like my per hour earning. I'm also tapped out in what I can do in my per week hours time on task. So at some point, I have two problems. One is if I want to continue to develop my practice and do other interesting things, I have to remove myself from coaching hours because I can't do brain stuff while I'm doing coaching stuff. I have to like be back here, like in the lab on the computer, tinkering with movements. So, I take a coach and I go, okay, you coach this person and, we figure out the splits and all that kind of stuff. And this is not anything new. This is not novel. This is the way businesses grow and develop. But like I'm explaining the machinery on purpose because I feel like a lot of coaches don't know what that would look like and why. So I then, no different than like whatever lawyer firm, you've ever worked with or whatever it is. Let's just say it's a mid-sized firm and it's got 3 partners and 10 seniors and the remaining juniors and whatever it is, right? Well, the juniors do all the kind of like grunt work and whatever, and then the mid do like the more sophisticated problems. And then the people at the top are generating business and orchestrating the strings and creating the brand and the identity and the infrastructure and stuff like that. And so ultimately, without going into the specifics, that's almost inevitably what it has to look like. Because in my mind, I want to consider myself, even though the industry probably won't recognize this, I want to consider myself as like, yes, lawyer, I have a graphic design firm. Yes, I have a personal training firm. It's like, I want those things to look and sound and feel and all the things to be the same. It's just a service delivery. It's just a different verb. It's different equipments, but it looks the same. And so somebody comes in and they're like, hey, I am a trainer and I've got this background and I went to school and all this kind of stuff. It's like, great, we have a position open as a junior trainer. Here is the revenue split per sessions and here's all the stuff. I work with Two Brain Gyms, which is like a gym consulting company. It's actually really cool to the degree that, when you sign up, you go, okay, based on your needs, here are 5 mentors that fit your profile. And you go, let's see, there's Joe and there's Peter and there's Sally and all this kind of stuff. And like, I think I'm going to go with Peter. That's my mentor's name because he kind of gets me or whatever it is. And so similarly, when a new lead comes in and I go like, okay, Sally, she has got a knee thing, whatever it is, used to play volleyball. I'll be like, hey, I think you'd be a really good fit for Jane over here, who also actually had all these things. And I know she's really good at fixing knees for volleyball players. What do you think? And they go, that sounds amazing. I go like, great, boom, here's the stuff. We're all organized. Here's the pricing. Here's the billing, distribution. And so somebody who is in that role as the CEO or the owner or the operator, whatever it is going to be doing less coaching, but they're going to be doing more orchestrating. Which, again, this is very much me reinventing the wheel. Like people who are in business, they're like, yeah, you're describing business. But I don't think coaches very often think in that way. They think of like, well, I'm just going to have a coach and I'll just coach. And then there'll be more coaches under me and then I'm going to coach. But it's like, there's like 90 hours worth of stuff when you have 5 employees that needs to get done every week or month or whatever that you just will neglect. And then your business will be rate limited and you'll just be like every other guy who tried to do it before you. And your coaches will leave because they're not getting paid enough. And like, for me, this is crystal clear. It all comes together at the nexus of well-paid coaches, a professional business, and, well, in this case, the brand is taken care of because, if ATG and Ben kind of operate as the glue to basically be like, I'm an ATG gym, ATG Bay Area, or whatever it is, then you've got this nexus of stuff that really allows people to succeed, deliver great results, make a great living, and all the bases are taken care of. And the business looks indifferent from a law firm or a marketing firm or an accounting firm or what have you.
I like the idea of using the word firm. It just puts people in the right mindset when they think of an ATG firm.
Yeah.
Because that makes total sense. When you think, law firms, I've worked in accounting firms and financial firms. That is how they work. You go to the firm, maybe, so like a brokerage firm. To some degree, the clients have a relationship with their particular advisor, but also to some degree, there is a brand of the overall firm itself. So let's take like Merrill Lynch, right?
Yep.
So you might have a personal relationship with your advisor, but there's also some trust because Merrill has some reputation, or pick your firm, whatever, has a reputation. And so in a way, that's kind of what you're describing, where the coach is like the advisor, but there is all this support that comes from ATG, such that ATG has its own unique brand that is unique in the marketplace.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love it. This needs to happen, Eric. This needs to happen. The world needs it. I want to be a customer of this type of organization. And as a former trainer, this is the kind of thing I always wished existed. I had a really great job in Vancouver, Canada, before I decided to go into capital markets. It was the closest thing to this. The training protocol wasn't anywhere close to what ATG is doing. It was completely different. It was much more circuit training in terms of what was prescribed. But the thing I respected about that job was they did prioritize paying their trainers well. And at the time, that was like $45,000 a year, right? And as a kid out of school, that was more than I was earning at any other gym, right? But yeah, I think you've correctly identified which is in order to have a high quality brand and high quality product, the coaches need to be paid on par with accountants and lawyers. Like they need to be seen as white collar professionals.
Yeah. Otherwise, I've seen it happen. I know exactly what happens and it's probably not going to change. So taking care of the coach has become my number one priority because all good things happen from there. I think that is the key to solving this problem at this point.
So what are you most excited about in your business and with ATG in general?
In my business, yeah, I've been doing this a really long time, and it's crazy how you think you've seen everything. And then, man, just this week, I've had like 3 or 4 things where like, wow, that is just shocking revelation in terms of new content, new things to think about. And I just get better and better and have more stuff to share with people. And so, like, every subsequent client, so like the next client I get will get a much better Eric than the 30th client I had 15 years ago or 14, 13 years ago. They're just getting a better version of me. And every single year that passes, that gets a little bit better. So I've just been really thrilled that there's almost like no ceiling to how much you can learn and incorporate and help people with that kind of stuff. As far as ATG goes, I mean, in the Pulse, as you know, there's a sub-pulse for gyms, and people have really sunk their teeth into this idea of they can be better and they can do it relatively quickly, and they can have difficult conversations and they can level up, and they are, and it's really cool to see. And then the cap to that is like, okay, this is what happened in 30 days. Imagine if you leverage that same level of intensity and kind of relentless reoptimization of your practice month after month, year after year, how good you could be 5 years from now. So all the questions you have about like, oh, where am I going to get leads? And I just don't really feel that confident about helping people with their ankles. Be like, don't worry, you will. Like, just keep doing it with intent and enthusiasm and all this kind of stuff. And 5 years from now, there's no reason. Like, if you went to undergrad, then you went to law school, and then you worked at a firm for a couple of years, you could come out of that net total of, well, forget undergrad, 5 years of experience with some like really acute knowledge and go to a firm that specializes in those things and really start to like an electrifying career of whatever that content area is that drives you. You don't have to be that old, but then by the time you get to 35, 40, all of a sudden you look around, you're like, oh, I know more about this than anyone else I know. It doesn't take that long. It just, you just got to be kind of like focused and disciplined about it.
Yeah, this is brilliant. I see why Ben and Alyssa were so excited to bring you on and talk to you. Yeah, I think this will be a big aha moment in the health and wellness industry in general. And I'm honored to be speaking with you today and to be this early in the conversations, because I don't think this is obvious yet to the broader world, but it was obvious to me about 18 months into signing up for the consumer side of the app, not even the coach side of the app. It's like, this needs to be everywhere. Yeah. Why can't I find this? I need to go down the street and go to a facility right now. And it just didn't, but I was just early. And apparently, like, you really started thinking about this maybe 18 months ago, 2023, I guess, or even more recently than that. So this is very exciting. As we close, are there any charities or causes that you would like to shout out? Anything that's really on your heart? It might be outside of the business or things that you're passionate about.
I mean, quite frankly, I'm just passionate about helping coaches right now. I mean, the way some of them are literally performing charity for their friends and family, like coaching for free. So like my service to the world, if you will, is like, how can I get more coaches to steer into coaching as a profession and really level up, as opposed to burn out, bleed to death, and just end up doing something else? Because arguably we need more people that want to make it, because there needs to be a critical mass to get to that next level. You can't do it with like 9 people. There has to be some critical mass. Just like there's millions of lawyers and millions of real estate agents and millions of accountants, there just has to be more of them, but they have to be good and they have to stay, and it'll never get there if they just constantly are just, defaulting to some other career choice.
The problem is churn. See, there is always going to be an initial supply of people who want to do this, because like me, right, I felt empowered by transforming my body at the age of 13, right? I stumbled upon a Bruce Lee book at 12 and then started reading about fitness and went down the rabbit hole and was like, I want to do this for my life. Yeah. And then exactly what you said happens to so many people, happened to me. And so I think if you continue to develop this model, continue to put out content about it, continue to show that this is a very lucrative and stable career path that you can be proud to tell your family about. Because let's be honest, a big reason why many people choose to be doctors, lawyers, and accountants is because it's respectable, it has a good reputation, and they're not trying to rock the boat. They want to, as you said, buy a house, have a car, put their kids in school, do sports, and can't really. If people choose to go into entrepreneurship, that is a great path, but it's less predictable than just like becoming a doctor, lawyer, accountant, right? Far more lucrative if you hit it, if you do it right, right? But so many people, I think, go into fitness because it changed their life personally. They want to give back, and then they realize that the models that currently exist are just never going to pay them enough to do it long term. And so you're onto something, and I'm excited to see you keep going.
I'm excited as well. I'm going to keep chipping away at it.
Awesome. All right, Eric, thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thank you.
See ya.